only, because I introduced three major types of questions, and I talked about the four disqualifiers, right? And one of the things that we want to do, are we rolling? Right, one of the things that we want to do is make sure for all questions, not just the tandems, not just the big picture questions, but for all of the questions, we want to make sure that we are constantly, we have our filters up. Those four disqualifiers, what are they? What are the four disqualifiers? Perspective. What are the two questions we should always be asking to make sure we have the right perspective?
About what issue?
From what point of view or whose point of view? About what specific issue? Because they love to give you answers that just miss. It wasn't about, as the example I gave you, it wasn't about the principle, it was actually about his policies, right? So just to have you barely miss, but have you kind of in, if you're not watching the language, not really careful, you can easily miss just barely on the perspective. So constantly watch your perspective. Whose point of view about what? What's another favorite disqualifier we have to look out for? Anything to do with timing, anything to do with order of events or sequence of events, anything to do with degree of timing, like is it always versus most of the time? If I say it often happens, does that imply the majority of the time? Not necessarily. So you have to be careful with that kind of wording. Always, none should raise red flags, because that could, possibly give you a good sounding answer that just misses. And so we need to be suspicious, because we can sometimes not see, oh, that's clearly the right answer, but we can usually go, that's clearly the wrong answer. And so we can filter out and narrow it down to the right answer. Like, I didn't like this answer, but it's the only one I didn't throw out because of a clear disqualifier. So timing, and what about the next one we have? Quantity. Many versus most versus some versus all, that's a warning, none. And what is their favorite quantity disqualifier that's kind of sneaky? Say it? No, before degree, their favorite of all of their quantity disqualifiers. Singular versus plural, what do people think? So watch out, singular, plural. And then lastly, degree, as you mentioned, if we start with, is it positive or is it negative? And then that's the easy distinction. And then to what degree is it negative? To what degree is it positive? And then there's another red flag word. I don't know if I gave it to you last time. I want to make sure we have it this time. If ever they use the word in an answer, only, you should go, only? Only this narrow window? Is that the only scenario? So it could be that the answer requires the word only. I don't know about how they're going to word the question, but the word only should make you go, okay, be careful here, right? All right, so those are the disqualifiers. And the three, review real quickly of the three major types of questions that impact about 65% of the test. You probably noticed these tandem pairs, right? Usually two per reading. Sometimes they have what I call a standalone, where it's kind of, it's a self-contained question and which lines best support the answer to this question. Sometimes it's a standalone. So I thought I would warn you, because I didn't warn you last time, and I don't think it applies on this particular test, but in future tests we have to be careful, because I've gone through with my students before, and because I don't like to look at the tests before they come to me with them, and I go, all right, so let's apply the strategy. Let's see if my strategy works. And there have been a couple of times I work with students and I go, they've got to be wrong. This can't possibly, oh, it's a standalone. I was applying it to the previous question, right? It wasn't what's the best evidence for the previous question. It was what's the best evidence for itself. And I just saw lines, okay? So that's a warning. If you just see lines this, lines that, all of your options, make sure, are they saying best evidence for the previous question or best evidence for this question itself? And so I've done that before. We've wasted like 10 minutes like this. But I just think that their answer's wrong. This is ridiculous. Oh no, I'm ridiculous. I was applying it to the previous one. Okay. So you guys don't get caught by that either. don't assume when you see the lines that it's evidence for the previous question. It could be, write down for yourself, near tandems. Watch out for standalones, okay, in case you get one of those that's self-contained. Don't automatically apply it to the previous. Make sure that's what it's asking. And then, what are some words that tell us that they're asking a big picture question? What are some words? Oh, this is clearly the big picture. Main, central, claim, primary, purpose, theme, idea, focus, summary. What happened? And in fact, one of our practice questions last week was essentially what happened. Right? And big picture questions need big picture answers. Okay, how many of you did the homework? Okay, good. Did you check your answers already? Good. I do want you to check your answers just to save us some time going forward, so that I can now say, what do we have questions on? What items did we miss? Let's get into the nitty gritty. This is where your training takes root. This is where we practice making sure we're asking the right questions, filtering out properly, catching the right vocabulary, bringing your attention to why you really should have had this, right? I can kick myself. I should have had it because of, right? So I want to give you as much individualized attention as possible. So here, don't say to me, oh, that's okay. I know what I did wrong in that one. I see now. Well, don't rob me of the opportunity to point out a little strategy or tip, okay? Don't be afraid to ask questions, how we get the answers. So, any questions in the first passage? We did some of these questions, but not all. I was going to say, people usually have trouble with a couple of these.
Number 7.
6 and 7 in particular cause a lot of trouble. Let's take a look at 7. Now, this is one of, what we're observing number 7 is one of their favorites. They love to give you 2 parts of an answer. 2 parts to the answer. Sometimes a verb and a noun, sometimes, just 2 parts that have to both be true. So we want to pay particular attention to any verb they use. So if we look at the question that wants to know what is the main purpose of the first paragraph, they're going to give you 2 parts to every answer, and this part's true. Don't pay attention to that part's false. We're going to try to trap you on every one. So what's the word in A that we like? What is that first paragraph? It seems cultural to me, right? But what about the verb? Are they describing the culture? The verb is false. Let's look at B. What word do we like in here? Talking about a tradition. But is anyone criticizing? No. What word do we like in C? He's questioning, isn't he? But then nobody suggests nothing. Right? There was no suggestion, but there were questions. See these questions? Pick me. But the suggestion, the noun makes it false. D, really? Analyze a reaction? How is he analyzing a reaction? I haven't done this. She hasn't done that. He's analyzing. That's how, it was a very tricky one. Most students get that one wrong. How many got that wrong? So beware of the 2 parts, and we can, like if you could hard strike disqualify A, B, and C, then you'd have to open your mind to the possibilities of, is this an analysis? Yeah, well, I guess it kind of is. A reaction? Yeah, cheese reaction. Okay? So a tough one, but again, if we learn to get really, critical with our hard strikes, I would rather my students go, A is clearly wrong. B, that's out. No, they're not doing, it's not a suggestion. D stinks too. Oh, geez, I just disqualified all of them. I would rather that than you go, I like A. Well, B looks good too, right? You're gonna get trapped. I'd rather you be more critical and go, they all stink. All right, I'm being hard on them. Let me think this through again, right? Well, these 2 100% have to go. And let me think about these 2. I would rather that than you getting trapped all the time, okay? What else?
6.
Number 6. There's a little bit of vocab in here too that could potentially trip you up. But how is Akira addressing she in 1920s Japan in the house of Fuji, a noble family, right? Well, affection? He doesn't even know her. He's not being affectionate, he's being formal, right? So the affection already I don't like. Not genuine love, well that's true, but I don't see him being affectionate in any way. Objectivity sounds reasonable. Objective. What's this not complete a partiality mean? To show partiality would be to show favoritism. Like, this doesn't even make sense. There's no favoritism or not favoritism in this scenario. That concept doesn't make sense here. So that's false. So the second half is going to be false. But for lack of a better answer, a lot of times people pick B. Okay. Amusement, just like last week when we saw the word cheerful, you should see amusement and go, no, nothing's funny here. It's not amusing. And then respect makes total sense in this cultural context. He's being respectful, but then a lot of students aren't sure what not utter deference means. Who knows what deference means, what it means to be deferential? If you're being deferential, yeah, I would say someone who, I wouldn't call it respectful, but here, if I'm being deferential, I'm not insisting on my own way. Like, if I'm in a group of friends and they go, hey, you guys want to go to a movie or you want to go bowling? Whatever you guys, I'm not going to insist on my own way. I'll go with whatever one else wants to do. I'm deferring to your opinion. Most students, when they see the word defer, they're thinking about college applications and they're like, oh, I got deferred, right? But that's not, the normal use of defer doesn't get applied that way. To be deferential is to be easy to get along with, to not insist on your own way. But he's not being totally and utterly deferential because he did break tradition. He did come knocking on her door. So that's why that's going to be our answer. But hopefully we can see why A and C would be thrown out. If you got trapped with B because of vocab, I could understand that. What else?
Silent or different?
Well, nothing else here? We can go to the next passage. 11 to 21. Anything in here?
21.
Anything before 21? 16 is part of a tandem, but you got 17 right. No. Okay, so let's walk through our tandem pair strategy, shall we? Step 1. Ask the first question as an actual question. So, how did you articulate the question, Taylor?
So, like, what if there is
Yeah, by the way, let me just point out, sometimes I almost have to look at the answers to say, wait, where is this question going? And I see what they're doing is they're just giving descriptive words, describing. So, having peeked at the answers, I might say the question is, how would you describe their assumption?
Yeah.
Something like that? Anyone think of a different way of wording it? How would you describe the assumption of the gift givers? Well, I need to know what their assumption is first, right? So let's go to 41 to 44, and Taylor, if you would read, what is their assumption?
It's gonna read the sentence that was okay.
Yeah, 41 to 44.
In the present research, we propose a unique physiological explanation for this overspending problem, i.e. that gift givers equate how much they spend with how much recipients will appreciate the gift. The more expensive the gift, the stronger a gift recipient's feelings of appreciation.
I really like the parentheses because they're going, here it is in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Okay, so the assumption is, I give you a more expensive gift, you appreciate it more. That's their assumption. More money, more appreciation. So what can we say about that assumption? So let's ask step 2, which is, are there disqualifiers in the question? And the answer is there's always the 2 perspective questions. Before we get to time and quantity and degree, let's think from whose point of view, or from what point of view? The passage. That's actually a big clue, because that means it doesn't have to be given in the voice of the gift givers. Does that make sense? I can answer this in someone else's voice about it. So point of view of, what are you doing to those kids? Okay. Oh, it's a theater kid. They're distracted. No, so it's from the point of view of anyone in the passage. So that's actually a clue. And about what? About the assumption of more money, more appreciation. What can we say about that? And I think one of the mistakes a lot of students were making on this is that they were looking from the point of view only from the gift givers. But it's from the point of view of anyone in the passage. So with that in mind, let's go read lines 53 to 55. 53 to 55. Perhaps givers believe that bigger, more expensive gifts convey stronger signals of thoughtfulness and consideration. Now, that doesn't answer the question, it actually restates the giver's opinion. So that's why I'm going to give that a hard strike, because it doesn't characterize it, it just restates it. Did anyone pick this one? A lot of times students will pick this one because it's about that, but it doesn't answer the question. Remember, your lines have to not be related, they have to answer the question. So those lines don't answer my question. So I'm going to go to the next set of lines, 55 to 60. According to Kammerer and others, gift giving represents a symbolic ritual whereby gift givers attempt to signal their positive attitude toward the intended recipient and their willingness to invest resources in future relationships. Well, Kammerer, who's I don't know, an expert or whatever you want to call him, is part of the passage, so the point of view is okay. Is he commenting on the gift giver's assumption that more money, more appreciation? Well, it says gift givers attempt to signal their positive attitudes and their willingness to invest resources. So I honestly think it does provide an answer. And the answer is, with words from these lines, that their assumption is that they can invest in future relationship or something like that. Now, I really do agree with you that it doesn't answer strongly on the gift giver's opinion, or assumption, excuse me, their assumption. It doesn't really comment on the assumption, but it does comment on the gift giver's perspective a little bit. So if I were to entertain this, I would have to say, if it does provide an answer, the answer would be, using these words, that they want to invest, their assumption is that they can invest more in the future relationship, using these words. And then if you go back to 16, nothing says that. Insincere would be the exact opposite, right? Unreasonable, it's not unreasonable to invest in your relationships. Incorrect makes no meaning, has no meaning here. And then substantiated means it's proven. That wouldn't work here either. It's just they're trying to invest in relationships and nothing says that. So even if you did feel that that provided answer, the answer that those words give is not given in 16, so you'd have to cross it out. And then lines 63 to 65, as for gift recipients, they may not construe smaller and larger gifts as representing smaller and larger signals of thoughtfulness and consideration. Now, are gift givers from the right perspective? Yeah, because it's the passage. So what do the gift givers have to say about the assumption of larger gifts, more appreciation? What do they say? smaller and larger signals of thoughtfulness, or excuse me, smaller and larger gifts don't necessarily represent smaller and larger signals of thoughtfulness. Okay, that is addressing their assumption. So if this is the answer would be smaller and larger gifts don't necessarily represent smaller and larger signals of thoughtfulness, and that matches with, that would mean they would be incorrect. It's not necessarily true. And that's, again, not just because they match, but because the lines do answer the question. Does that make sense in terms of how we walk through that? All right. And if you really wanted to, you can go to 75 and 78 to check those lines to make sure. Or if you're like, I'm so confident these lines 100% do answer the question, this is exactly what it's saying, you can save yourself some time and move on. I still like to read the last one too, because I'm a little OCD about that, and if I have time. If I'm running short of time, I'll move on. Next, in before 20, anything before 20. Okay, let's talk about 21. What would they attribute the differences from the mean appreciation from between the gift giver and the recipient? Well, it's all about the gift giver's false assumption that if I give more, it'll be appreciated more, but gift recipients don't see it that way. So what would we attribute that to? An inability to shift perspective. Think about your four disqualifiers. Is there anything that you look at this and go, oh, hard strike, or I don't like that, or I'm suspicious of this?
The perception shift.
Sorry?
The perception shift thing.
The perspective?
Yeah.
Okay, but if I think about it, I've got givers and recipients that would represent two different perspectives. I can see you going like, I don't know if this is the right answer, but I don't see anything in here, and if you see something, tell me, but I don't see anything in this answer that screams at me, clearly throw me out. I would go, okay, not so sure about you, I'll leave you. Let's go on to B, see what else, see if I can clearly throw something else out and make it easier on myself by narrowing it down. Why don't we like B? Although some people did like B. It's not about being material. That is totally the wrong perspective. That's not what this passage is even about. It's not about materialism. It's about giving gifts and how that is interpreted in relationships and what was that called again? The deadweight loss phenomenon, yeah. And that wasn't about materialism. So I don't like the materialism. And one other little side note, if ever you see an answer that seems really harshly critical, be suspicious of that, because really, again, stronger degree of language, like what we're criticizing our culture. We're just all materialistic. I mean, that's an easy thing to say to try to insult ourselves, but it's kind of a strong criticism, so we should always be suspicious of those. Do we have people opposing gift giving? I don't see an opposition. I don't like the word opposition, and I'm also suspicious of the word growing. I didn't get a sense of quantity increasing in opposition either, so I don't like that. And then a misunderstanding of intentions is often a trap answer, because the misunderstanding is there. It's definitely a misunderstanding, but is it about intentions? Like, what are you doing with it? What are you after? What do you want from me? Right? No, it's not. You know, it's not about the intentions. And so I can see why you would get trapped there. The misunderstanding part looks attractive, but it's the intentions that would throw it out, and that's why it would be. Any thoughts or consideration about the item that you chose as to why you can't see now, why I should have disqualified that? Any clarifications? All right. Let's continue then. Next passage. 27. Now, when they tell you, see how these words are used in lines 47 to 49, guess where your best clue will not be? The best clue comes when you read through a sentence or two. Best clue comes when you read through a sentence or two. So let's read to the end of that. Can I get a volunteer? Lily, right? Yeah.
Thus one chain is, as it were, the complement of the other, and it is the sweet just polydeoxy-ribonucleic acid molecule might duplicate itself.
Might do what?
Duplicate itself.
Aha! I think that word right there, everything I just said indicates how the DNA does what? Duplicates itself. All of that leads to duplication. And so when you look at the correct answer, there are 3 different words that scream duplication. What are they? Indeed, which is the correct answer. I heard copied, yep, what else? Template and replication. So I don't say that it's just a matter of seeing this word and matching these words, but I do say they love using synonymous expressions. And so I think the word duplicate itself was the strongest clue, and of course it comes outside of those lines. All right, next. We're jumping to 33. Anything else before then? Okay, so we got 32. You saw your big picture question in 32? It's about an issue. But 33 is also a big picture question because it says central claim. So from the first and last, we should also be able to answer this. So even though you got 32 correct, let's go and do our first and last reading and apply it to 33 as the central claim big picture question. Always, always, always read the blurb intro. That is part of the first. So from the first, I know that this passage is about women's situation in English society in the 1930s. So that's the big picture. And in the first paragraph, it says, ladies, we, ladies, are pressed for time. Now we're here to consider facts. We must fix our eyes on the procession of the sons of educated men. So it's about we women considering our situation and learning something from this procession and considering facts. And then for the last, it's the whole rest of the passage. So we're going to read the last what? 10-ish lines. And in the last 10 or so lines, I see words like think we must think here, we must think there. What does that connect with in the first part? In the first paragraph? We need to consider facts. We must think. So this is about women having to consider their situation in English society in the 1930s. And then we end with this question, what are these professions? Why should we make money of them? Where is it leading us? So what's the focus? What's the main perspective about this first and last? It's about how are these changes affecting us women? We, us. So when we look at the answers in offered for 33, we go educated women. Okay, I'm a little concerned about the educated part. I was thinking maybe all women, but maybe educated women, because they are talking about what sounds like a graduation ceremony. But I'm concerned. Have position, face a decision. I like that. We must think. We must consider facts. We have to deal with this. About how to engage with existing institutions. Okay, I don't see anything that I wanna give it a hard strike to. I'll leave it. B, women can have positions of influence in English society only if they give up their traditional roles. I didn't see anyone giving up traditional roles. I saw them, and I didn't see anyone making decisions. I saw them thinking. Consider, where's it leading us, ladies? How's it gonna impact us? Now, you by extension might think, oh, well, that might change traditional roles, but it doesn't say that, we're just thinking. So that only is my big concern there. And I read C and I go, the male, yeah, this is not it. Not about you men this time, it's about us ladies and how it affects us. And then D is the perfect answer until the last word. The entry of educated women, yeah, educated women, gotcha, into positions of power traditionally held by men, sounds right, will transform those positions. Lost perspective on the last word. It's about how women will be affected, not about how the positions will be affected. You see that? Lost perspective on the last word. So the answer we'll go back to and take A. Next. 35. Sometimes these types of questions are the hardest because they don't tell you where to look. Like, where do I find that? I like these ones that tell me where to look because I can go do a contextual read and I can usually answer them. But where's this one? How about sentence 1? It's in sentence 1. There's 2 words in the first sentence that connect with a key word in the answer. And if you've already checked your answers, you probably know that the answer will be B. And there's a word in the answer that connects perfectly with 2 of the words synonymously, you might or might not notice, in the opening sentence. Why are they there? To watch. Well, how do you know they're watching? What are the words that tell you to watch? Vantage ground. What's a vantage ground or a vantage point?
High is the high ground.
The high ground from which you can get a good view. And there's a second word in there too. What are they going to do from there? They're going to survey the situation. They're going to make a survey or look at and check it out. And that's the view. Okay, that's tough. I mean, if you happen to see that first sentence again, maybe you go, oh, I see this. But otherwise, you're looking like, I didn't see this. Yeah.
This isn't like necessarily applicable to like a specific question, but like, so you said like for big picture questions, like read like first and last, and then like depending on like if it's like referencing like a specific paragraph, but like you should still be like reading the whole passage, right?
All right, let's talk about that for a moment. Personally, I like to read the whole thing.
Okay.
Because I can afford to, because I'm not worried about the time. How many of you are concerned about time? So, those who are concerned about time, one of the best time savers is you turn to the passage, you read blurb first, last. Get the big picture. Now, if they ask you any big picture questions, you can immediately answer them. If they don't, go to all the questions that tell you lines where to look and do your contextual read. And look for tandem pairs because you'll answer both of those, you know what lines to read. Excuse me. Any questions where, like, I don't know where to look for this answer? Save you for that. I'm gonna go do all my contextual reads first, and now I will have read pretty much the whole thing. And if I didn't read the whole thing, and I look at this question, I go, well, I haven't read here yet. That is a great time-saving technique. Blurb first, last, address all the line-cited questions, or questions where you know where to look, and save the ones you don't know where to look for last, and then by that point, you might be able to answer it, or know where to look. Make sense? So I would that's not what I'm gonna do. I'm still gonna read the whole thing. because I can't. So if you can, and it's not a stress for time for you, I would recommend you read the whole thing. All right. What's next? 36, 37, got burned someone, no? Okay, let's go through our tandem pair. And because you know why I know you're gonna get burnt on this? Because you're just learning the tandem pairs and you're not yet disciplined with the, I'm gonna watch for those qualifiers, right? So let's apply this. First question, is not a question, so let's articulate it. How would you ask this first question? If you're not asking the right question, you're not getting the right answer. Anyone get the tandem pair right? So what is the, so let's make sure, how would you ask this question?
What is the process she describes, the procession she describes? Or how does she describe it?
That's better. How does she describe the procession? That's it. It's not what, the question isn't about the procession, the question is about her description. So yeah, I would like that. How does she describe the procession? So, point of view, wolf, which is not a problem because there are no other voices here than the author, so that's pretty straightforward. About what? The procession. If you don't stick to that, you're gonna get this wrong. The question is, from her point of view, about the procession. How does she describe it? How does she describe that procession? So let's go to our lines, 12 to 17. There they go, our brothers who have been educated at public schools and universities, mounting those steps, passing in and out of those doors, ascending those pulpits, preaching, teaching, administering justice, practicing medicine, transacting business, making money. First question, is this from the right point of view? Yes, it's Wolf. Is it about the right thing? Is this a description of the procession? It doesn't say in these lines, but in front, you can see that she is in fact describing the procession, yes? Okay, so if this is the answer, with these words, what's the answer? How does she describe this procession? No, don't say C. I don't even know what C says yet, so why are you telling me that? You got trapped, fucker. Just kidding, I'm sorry. No, don't mean to be too harsh. No, but that's what happens when you look, you'll get trapped. So I don't even know what it says yet. I want to know with these words, how is she describing it with these words in the lines? She's describing it as what? Full of men.
Or educated.
Who got their education and getting ready to go out and make money. Okay. Then I'll go look, does anything here say, full of men, got educated, or going out to make money? And nothing comes close except C, but now let's apply our disqualifiers to C. It includes all, richest, circle the EST. No offense, but I think there were some teachers and preachers in there too, okay? I don't think it's all of the richest. Most powerful? Look, all the degree disqualifiers in there.
Okay.
So the disqualifiers sometimes are in the questions, they're sometimes in the text, they're sometimes in the answers. We're having our filters up at all points. So that is the most common trap pair, because they seem to be related. But if you have your disqualifier filters up, we catch them. All right, it did provide an answer, but that answer is not there. So let's go read lines 17 to 19. It is a solemn sight always, a procession, like a caravanserai crossing the desert. Well, she's describing the procession, isn't she? With those words. How does she describe it? Solemn, like a caravan crossing a desert. Let's go to 36. Does anything say that it's solemn, like a caravan crossing a desert? No. So I have to cross out lines B, even though it did in fact describe the procession. Let's go to C. 23 to 24. For there, traipsing along at the tail end of the procession, she's describing the procession, we go ourselves. Who's we? Okay, so she's describing the procession. With these words, how's she describing it? She's describing it as, we women are at the tail. Is anything saying anything remotely similar to we women are at the tail? Now, I have students all the time who will look at these and go, no, nothing says that. You missed. Okay, you missed. Let's go to D. You don't think this provides anything? Let's go to D. Lines 30 to 34. We too can leave the house, can mount those steps, pass in and out of those doors, make money, administer justice. We even agitate these humble pens, nail another century shoes, keep from the pulpit. Why do we have to throw this out? Not describing the procession. And a lot of students will pick this as beautiful support for the answer in 36. It definitely supports it, doesn't it? But it doesn't answer the question, because it doesn't address the procession from the right perspective. So let's go back and figure out why saying women are at the tail end of the procession matches with D. How is less exclusionary covered in we women are at the tail end? Because we have to have evidence that it's less exclusionary. Well, we women are in there now. So it's less exclusionary, right? Okay. We must also have evidence for recent years. We're at the tail end. It's a recent addition, yes? So both parts are covered. It's a tough one, but I hope you see how we had to throw out A and B and D. And C is the one that gives us the answer in 36. And it's not as obvious, but now you see. It's going to be synonymous. And both parts of that answer in 36 have to be covered in the lines. That's important, because you're gonna run into eventually, you're gonna run into some questions where these lines give you this answer. Well, technically they give you this half of that answer. Well, then that's not the right lines, because it must cover both parts of the answer. I'm not gonna reveal too much, because I wanna see if you catch it in future practice. More questions? 41. Okay, so we need to think at funerals, we need to think at baptisms, we need to think at Lord Mayor's coronations, we need to think at all of these different places, yes? So the question is, what do all of these different occasions and all of these different places serve to do? And the most common error, what did you guys pick? This may be a true statement. I think it is a true statement. But does all of these locations, this is our point of view or perspective. The question is, all of these range of places do not imply newness. Circle the word novelty. That means newness. Yes, there's challenges to women, yes. But that one word, novelty, I see as a timing clue. It's not about the newness, it's about what? Affecting all aspects of society. Here, there, at home, births and funerals and daily stuff, as well as elections and everything else. It's going to affect us everywhere. It is, in fact, a new challenge. It is. But all the different locations don't mean newness. Does that make sense? And so that's why that's a trap. What does pervasive mean, on the other hand? Throughout, in all parts. And that's what that connects with, is the pervasiveness. And it's possible you missed it just because maybe you weren't too comfortable with the word pervasive. And if we got burned because of vocab, we got burned first because of vocab. Go to the YouTube channel. channel and start watching some of those videos. In fact, I'm going to try this week, I'm gonna try to send you guys a PDF that's a video library, a vocab, and so that you can just, when you see a word you don't know, you can just click on it, it'll pull up the YouTube video. Yeah. Like, share, subscribe, just kidding. All right. But yeah, so we do have to be building vocab, and that may have been a vocab, that just stopped you from getting the answer. Next. Last passage, the parallel passage. Let me talk to you about a bigger issue about parallel passages first, and then I'll go to your specific questions. Something that must be true necessarily for all parallel passages. There will always, how often? Be a contrast between the two perspectives of the authors. One of your chief jobs is to find out how strong is that contrast. Are they kind of in agreement, but this guy just says yes, but only on weekends? Or are they like, if you put these two people in a room, they'll punch each other and start fighting? How strong is that contrast? Certain topics lend themselves to this. And you know historically it was this. In fact, led to bloodshed. Slavery. Some of the founding documents. You expect a lot more of this. Why? Because we're trying to come up, we're addressing and wrestling with transformational issues. It's fundamentally transforming society. Women's suffrage transformative. So you're going to get a lot of this, a lot of a harsh debate, or a strong debate. So just telling me what the topic is, I can probably tell you, I expect this. Don't leave those two people in the same room together, okay? So I expect when they ask me, what would author of passage 2 say about author of passage 1? He'd say he's an idiot, he's gonna punch him in the mouth, he's wrong, I'm being exaggerating, but I expect stronger degree, yes? In this case, in this passage, how strong is our contrast? Not much. Look at the first guy, the first opening sentences. He says, well, how does he say, what does he say? Follow the money you let up in space? We're going to space. We're doing space mining. It's happening. And the other guy, he starts out saying, look, he says, no doubt this will make a few billionaires even wealthier, but we all stand to gain. He's positive. Okay? It should enrich us all. Look at the first word of the second paragraph. But, cool your jets. We need to think this through more carefully. I'm the adult in the room. We need to be careful. It has implications. You can't just go rushing off into space. So it's a mild contrast, and he's trying to sell himself as the, like I said, the voice of reason. But there is a contrast, but not much. I say that because there'll be at least one of the questions you can answer just because you know how strong or weak the contrast is by watching the degrees. All right, anything on the first page, 42 to 48? Okay, so 43 goes with 44.
Yeah.
So let's do this. What is the functional question in 43? What's a positive effect from space mining? What could be a positive effect of space mining? Point of view, the author, not someone he's quoting, the author. About what? Positive effect of space mining. So then we go to the lines. You got 44 correct? No? Okay. Let's start with the lines you chose in 44, which are?
Or no, that's the right one. 41 to 44.
41 and 44.
Yeah.
Companies are eyeing the iron, silicon, and aluminum in lunar soil and asteroids, which could be used in 3D printers or make spare parts, to make spare parts or machinery. Okay, so if this is the answer would be what? A positive result could be that we can get iron, silicone, and aluminum to make things. And if you look at A, which is the right answer in 43, it could yield materials important to Earth's economy. It's kind of close, it's kind of saying that, right? But what does lines 18 to 22 say? Something even stronger with better materials that you can't get on Earth. And so saying it could yield materials, well, we aluminum and silicon, we got that stuff here. But in 18 to 22, they say yttrium, lanthanum, okay. I don't know how much of that stuff we have, but we can get other stuff that could potentially help the economy. And what is the connection to the economy? Earthly demands and personal electronics. Yeah. So I think, lines, notice the 44 says which provides the best evidence. I do think 41 to 44 provides evidence, but I think 18 to 22 is the best evidence. And if you did pick 41 to 44, you should have picked A and 43. What did you pick in 44? So 3D printers is not innovative, new. It's not new, we have them.
Okay.
So that would technically be a timing disqualifier for C. It's not unanticipated because we already have them. And it's not innovative because that was new. Right, any other questions on those two? Okay, next. 46. I'm going to approach this one just a little bit different. I want to compare and contrast your answer with correct answer and see what's similar and what's different. Because a lot of times, it comes down to a key word or two. So what is an attractive answer that might pull you away from the correct answer? What did you pick?
I actually did pick C, but I just wasn't confident in it. So,
Get used to it.
yeah. So let me look at one that I would have.
So that's okay.
I
don't
would
know.
pick C, but I was between A and C.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're between A and C, let's talk about that. What's similar, what's different?
Or D, actually.
It continues an extended comparison that begins in the previous paragraph. Well, it's extending something from the previous paragraph, isn't it? But it's no longer comparing, it's talking only about one aspect. It's no longer comparing them. So the word comparison disqualifies A. So there's your one word disqualifier for A. It's not comparing.
I underlined it.
Good.
That's why
Yeah, but that happens a lot. You're gonna say, well, I'm not crazy about this, I'm not, but all the rest suck, I'm not. And my filters filtered out the other three, I guess I'm stuck with you. Okay. And let's take a look at 49. Anyone miss 49? Oh,
No, but I have another question.
please.
I don't really understand tandem pairs.
Yeah, that is the single biggest challenge, the tandem pairs. So that's why I give you 5 steps to go through where you don't read the answers they give in the first one because usually you'll end up getting trapped. And students end up trying to look for an answer in the first one that seems to somehow match with the lines in the second one. But the fundamental difference, you've got to find the answer in the lines. Do the lines answer it? That's how you will avoid getting trapped. And I'll be honest with you, it takes a little time to get used to applying these 5 steps, being disciplined with them. So you're in the same boat as most students. It's new. we have to continue practicing applying them until we get better. I have a friend who also does this, training for students, and the way he describes it is, he says, I see a lot of my students do this. Like, I'm not making any progress on these tandem pairs, I'm still not very good at it, and then once you, suddenly you'll get it, and, you start getting them all right, almost all of them right. Other students will follow a different path. I have a student who, I don't know, something about it clicked for him. He just, boom, he got like every last tandem pair right after one session. I'm like, dude, really? You sure you don't cheat? Okay, that's not normal, but he just something clicked for him. That's not the norm. And you know what else is common is, well, I did better, oh, I did worse. Well, I did better, oh, I did worse. But my better and worse get better and better. So don't be impatient with yourself on this. We're gonna have to just, continue practicing applying the strategy. And that's why I say initially, leave your step-by-step out and don't worry about the clock, because it's more about learning to apply the strategy and getting comfortable with it at first. And if you can, as we go forward, come up with what is it that you're specifically part of the process that's tripping you up, I'll address that in more detail for you. But for now, I'm gonna say, don't worry about the clock for the tandem pairs. When we practice, have your 5 steps out and try to be OCD about following each step and see if we're able to start catching more. Next. I wanted to ask how you did with 49. Did anyone trip up on 49? Okay, so let's go back to what I said. We know that the contrast is mild, right? So what's the relationship? What don't we like about A as an answer? Isn't that a strong word, refute? Why don't I like B? Sorry? Well, the phenomenon is, space mining, I don't know. Maybe that's not exactly a phenomenon because it hasn't happened yet, but yeah, so I don't like the word phenomenon, that's true. But moreover, is there any contrast at all? No, we just have the second guy doing more of the first guy with no contrast. So I would say, no, there's no contrast at all here, and I need some. What do we like about C? Too strong a degree, isn't it? No one's arguing, you kind of agree. And then here's D. I got some reservations. It's a mild. But it is a contrast, unlike B. So I heard 50, what about 51? Did we get 51? Okay, so I want to follow up on that, because this is one of the things that starts happening. I got the first one, but missed the second one, or I got the second one, but missed the first one. And if you got the lines, but missed the previous answer, your error usually is at step 4, where you do what? At step 4 in the tandem pair strategy. What are you supposed to do at step 4? Articulate the answer using words from those lines, because we take those words to compare with the answers in the first one. That's usually where that's where it slipped out. So let's check to see if that's the case here. The question is, how would author passage 2 respond to what author passage 1 said in those lines 18 to 28? Well, let's go reread the lines 18 to 28 and see that he says, within a few decades, we might be finding all these great things and mining them and bringing them back, and like a gold rush, this could be all great. What would he say about that? Well, the lines you got correct. Tell me the lines so we can save a little time on that. 85 to 87. Without consensus, claims will be disputed. Investments risky and gains made insecure. It is in all of our long-term interest to seek out one. To seek out one what?
Resolution?
Well, no, I've not even read that yet. Don't be talking to me words from the answers yet. I mean from these lines. Without consensus, claims will be disputed, investments risky.
Consensus.
Yeah, so that's the main word here. We need a consensus. So if this is the answer, he would say, wait a minute, dude, we need a consensus so that what? Investments aren't risky, so that claims are not disputed, so that gains will be secure. So he would say we need a consensus so that there's no disputed claims and so that investments aren't risky. Using those words, we go back to 50 and we say, he would say that it's inconsistent with the single use of space. He's not saying it's inconsistent, he's just saying we need a consensus so that we don't have disputes, so that we don't have a risky investment. Will be difficult to bring about in the absence of regulations. Regulations? I don't see a connection to regulations. Probably don't, and cross it out and go to C. Cannot be attained without technologies that don't yet exist. Well, it doesn't say that. To me, if 85 to 87 are correct, it's definitely not A or C. 100%, those would get hard strikes from you, they don't connect. And then D says, seems certain to affect Earth's economy in a negative way. What's the one word that makes that false? Certain. There's no certainty, that's too strong of a degree. He says, without a consensus, this will happen, but it's not certainly going to happen. So what is the one word in our answer, in our lines, that matches with regulations? It's a tough connection.
Consensus.
We need consensus, but you know what helps me to know that that connects with regulations? So that there aren't disputed claims. You have regulations to prevent disputed claims and risky investments. I think that helps too. Other questions? 52. Oh, this is one of those where you just have to go, it says it exactly. Explicit versus implicit. So implicit means, he doesn't say it directly, but it's implied. Explicit, he says it directly. And, you know, you have to find it in the text. Let's see. What is the answer? In passage 2, look at line 74, 75, he says it pretty directly. Resources are valuable in orbit may be different from what we prize on Earth. That's directly saying that.
Yeah.
And again, sometimes those are the hardest ones where you don't know where to look, but you've got to find it. And it's implied in the first one when he talks about water versus gold. Any other general questions on the reading?